Hi guys, welcome to today's video. I want to talk about a topic that is dear to me, which is how do you pick which camera is good for you? And I'm talking here about a beginner photographer. I've had this problem a few years ago when I started photography, and I was questioning what camera is right for me, which one should I buy, and I scoured the internet for information on which one to pick, and it was pretty hard. So I figured today I'm gonna give you a little bit of a guide on how to proceed and what to look for into a camera so you could choose what is right for you. Like I said, this is for beginner photographers. If you are a pro photographer or you've been doing this for years and you've tried different models, you know how to choose a camera and what is right for you, and you don't need this guide. But if you're beginning and you're not sure just what to get yet, well, this video might be able to help you. So without further ado, let's get into the main things you have to look out for when you're choosing your camera. First of all, today in 2023, there are so many great options, and the price points on cameras have gone down, and now with entry-level cameras, you can get some very high-performing camera bodies. It's not the same as it was a few years ago when you had to kind of put in a bit of money into what cameras you wanted to get if you wanted to get really nice pro results, whereas nowadays, even with entry-level cameras, you get some really good gear. One question that people ask is, should you go for full-frame cameras or is APS-C sensors good enough? And my answer is APS-C is good enough. I've been shooting on APS-C for years, and yes, full frame has some advantages, but APS-C is great nonetheless, and you can get really good results with that kind of sensor without spending the amount of money you would spend on a full frame system. Now, let's talk about the advantages of full frame. Full frame means the size of the sensor inside the camera body is bigger, meaning that there's going to be more light coming into the sensor, which means that the picture is going to end up being higher quality and it's going to capture more light, which means that if you're in a dark environment, your camera is going to perform better. With a full frame sensor, you can also create more background blur and separate your subject from the background. However, with an APS-C sensor and the right lens, you can still create very nice bokeh. You don't have to have full frame to have that depth of field in your photos. So that's the advantage of full frame, but it's still, you can still do it with an APS-C sensor. So that shouldn't be a factor that's determining which kind of camera you're gonna get. Now, APS-C has advantages in and of itself. For example, APS-C sensor being smaller, they can create camera bodies that are smaller and lighter. Some of the photographers are maybe travel photographers, or they just need smaller camera bodies, things that are lighter so they can carry it around. That is also something to consider. Another advantage of the APS-C sensor is usually APS-C camera bodies are cheaper, and the lenses that go with them are smaller and also cheaper. They can get very sharp, they can give you amazing results, and yet you don't have to break the bank to get them. So if APS-C is good and you don't necessarily have to go full frame, what are other things you need to look for? Well, first of all, you have to figure out what kind of photography you're gonna be doing. Mainly when I started, I was really interested in street photography. What I really wanted to do was travel and capture street life and explore the world and just capture everything with my camera, which means that for me, the main thing, the most important thing was to get a camera that would give me great results without being too big or too heavy or too hard to carry. With that in mind, I chose a certain camera body that I thought was lightweight enough and yet good enough to give me pro results. So what are you going to be shooting most? Are you going to be a studio photographer doing portraits? Or are you going to be a street photographer or travel photographer, landscape photographer? All these are going to determine which cameras you should get. The last thing you need to consider, are you going to be shooting photography only? Or are you going to be doing video only? Are you a hybrid shooter? Are you shooting videos for YouTube? Are you shooting videos for weddings? Are you shooting documentaries? Or you're just a photographer and you're just capturing stills? All of that also has to be taken into account, because if you are shooting video, certain cameras that are very expensive and could be great for photography are not necessarily going to be the best for video. For example, any of you may know, if you know my channel already, I shoot with Fujifilm. I love Fujifilm cameras. Fujifilm is known for its quality for photography. However, it's kind of lacking in the video world, because Fujifilm has terrible stabilization for videos, and the autofocus could be good enough for photos, but when it comes to videos, sometimes it could be a little laggy. I would highly recommend, if you're shooting videos, to go for certain brands like Canon or Sony that have great stabilization and great autofocus. And for example, Fuji, which is my favorite brand, I would not recommend that for a video. However, if you're a hybrid shooter, there are some options with Fujifilm, and if you are a photographer only, then Fujifilm to me is one of the best brands of cameras out there. So once you figure out what type of photography you're going to be doing, and you have figured out what your budget is, because it also comes down to budget. Cameras can be very, very expensive. If your budget is low, or if you're just starting out and you're not confident that you're going to be spending 5 grand on a camera body, and that's without even considering lenses, then budget really comes into play. So first of all, you figure out your budget, and depending on your budget and what kind of photography or video you want to capture, then you can choose what kind of camera you want to get. Now I'm going to give you a few suggestions, maybe cameras that I would get in this case scenario. It is not the answer to everything, it's my personal preference. I encourage anyone that watches this video, if you're like not a pro photographer necessarily, but if you know your stuff in cameras already, maybe help the people that are in the comments down below. If they're looking for a first camera and they don't know what to get, maybe you can give your input and then start a conversation. Let's say you have a low budget and your main photography is going to be travel, street photography, meaning that you want a system that is lightweight, discreet, and on a low budget. So I would recommend the Fujifilm X-T30. The reason is it's a very small body, it's interchangeable lenses, which means you can have multiple lenses to get multiple angle of views, and at the same time, it's low entry into the Fujifilm line of cameras. You can get the X-T30 body for around $1,080 right now on Amazon. If you're on the low budget side, but you're gonna be doing photography only and you wanna get something that you can grow into and use for years, and that's a bigger, more capable body, I would highly recommend the Fujifilm X-T5. Now that is photography only camera. Still Fujifilm that has the great color science and the great colors of Fujifilm, but it's also very performant. It has a high megapixel count, which means you can do prints in large size, and the autofocus has been updated and it's faster, and yet you stay into the Fujifilm realm. That is a higher budget, but it's still not a $5,000 camera. I think you can get this camera right now on Amazon for the price of $16.99. Now, let's say you're still on the lower end of the budget and the main thing you want to capture is video. I wouldn't recommend people that want to shoot video to go into Fujifilm systems, because like I said, the stabilization isn't great and the autofocus in the video mode is not as great either. What I recommend for entry-level video is a newer camera that was released by Sony this year. It is the Sony ZV-E1. This camera body goes for $2,200 right now on Amazon, so it's getting a little higher in price ranges. But it's a full frame camera, so you get very nice dark situation results. So if you're in nighttime or if you're in a dark room, you can get a very, very good footage. And the stabilization on this camera is out of this world. It kind of looks like you have a gimbal, even though you don't. For video, highly recommend the ZV-E1. If you want a very high performing video camera and you don't really have a limit in your budget and you can go spend $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 into a camera body, then I wouldn't recommend the ZV-E1. For video capabilities, one of the best cameras that came out a few years ago and is still king to this day is the Sony Alpha 7S III. This camera for video is the best there is out there for people that are just going to be vlogging on YouTube, or if you want to capture some more higher quality video. This is a very, very performant camera. It has great autofocus, great stabilization, and Sony has amazing lenses right now. So you can get into the Sony environment buying that body and then have amazing choices in lenses. So I would highly recommend the Sony A7S III. That camera body right now is almost $3,500 on Amazon. But the good news is it's kind of older, so it's been out for a few years, so you can get this camera body used and kind of get a discount on it. Now, if I was to choose one of my favorite cameras for stills, for photography only, that is going to be very high performance, but you don't care about budget or the weight and size of the camera, I would highly recommend the Canon R3. That camera came out last year. It's very big, very heavy, and very expensive. but man, it seems to be so performant for sports photography and capturing things in movement. The autofocus is unreal. And picture quality coming out of this camera is really, really high. So if you don't mind carrying a very heavy body and spending about $5 grand on the camera body alone, then I would go and choose this camera. The Canon R3 actually goes for $5,800 on Amazon right now. Now that's very expensive, and I don't recommend people to just go spend that much money unless they know that they're going to be shooting Canon for years and that they need the highest quality possible without getting into the medium format cameras. Now this is it. Those are just suggestions. They're not like necessarily the best choices for you, but that's what I would recommend if I was in your position and I'm a beginner photographer and I'm looking to purchase my first camera. I would first go and look at what kind of photography I'm going to shoot, what is my budget, and am I going to be doing a video or a photo? And with all those three to consider, here are my choices. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and I hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, just let me know in the comments down below. And like I said, guys, if you know about photography and video and you have recommendations of your own, please talk about it in the comments down below with the people that are searching for their first camera and help them figure it out. And I'll see you guys in another video very soon, and feel free to like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next week for another one. Cheers.